we went back to each one of those values, which we call passions, and we did an hour to hour and a half long class on each one of those as an organization to say, hey, why did we pick that in the first place? What was it like? What were we thinking back in 2012 when we chose that? How has it manifested itself through examples since then, so that we can really make sure that we're understanding it, acknowledging it, and continuing to live. Really, we're committed to having an environment where you can learn and grow, work hard, serve your clients, and have a culture of meaning, and where folks just enjoy coming to work and they enjoy the relationships that they have, and that where we can put our people first and have that healthy combination of both.
Hey, welcome to this week's episode of The Freedom Experience. I'm your host, John Moncrief. Now, my guest today is Deanna Walker. She's the CEO of Venturity. They're what could best be described as a people-first accounting firm that's quietly redefining what culture looks like in professional services. Now, I know what you're thinking. Accounting firm and culture don't often feel like they show up together or show up in the same sentence even sometimes. But when we visited Venturity for a Small Giants passport event, you could really just kind of feel it the moment you walked in there. There's this spark of business charisma, which, as Bo Birmingham put it in his book, Small Giants, you could call mojo. Mojo, the business equivalent of charisma. So over the past decade or so, Deanna and her team have layered together systems like Small Giants, open book management, values-based hiring, Zing trains work on customer service, and an ESOP model, all to create a workplace where people show up with energy, accountability, and a genuine sense of ownership. In this conversation, we get into why culture is a process and not just some kind of project that you sort of kick off, and what it really takes to keep values alive in a growing company. We also talk about open book management and how open book management paved the way for employee ownership at Venturity, and why that matters in a marketplace where private equity is knocking on everybody's door. And then finally, we look at Deanna's own leadership journey, from investment banking to CEO of Venturity now, and how that all shaped her belief in empowering others and building with intention. This one's for anyone trying to grow a company where people love to work without losing sight of performance or purpose. So, with that said, let's get into it. Deanna, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Happy to be here, John. Just excited for you and your new role and to get to know you a little bit better.
Brilliant. As I said, it feels like it's been years already. It's only been just over 3 months, but we had a fantastic passport event at your offices last week. It feels like it was the weekend between, but it feels like it's gone quickly. Yeah. I think what stood out for me, and just to frame things up, was Venturity is an accounting business, but walking in, we feel that kind of mojo that Bo describes in Small Giants. There is this charisma in the business. The owner of the business, Chris, he's off pursuing his dream, educating students at university. Yeah. I was really intrigued by the culture, this idea of we still dress very smart, but still these kind of Nerf gun wars break out across the office. And there were interesting comments around having a jeans day, kind of going against the grain. But I'm curious to start with, how did your culture evolve, and how have you kind of grown this culture with intention in what is typically a kind of dry, rigid environment with accountants?
Yeah, no, well, first I will say thank you for the opportunity to be part of the first returning, I guess, inaugural passport event when I got involved in Small Giants back in 2014, 12, something like that. The passports were alive and well, and I never got to go on an official one because shortly after I joined, we kind of went a different direction as an organization with them. But I did a version of my own, making it pass through Chicago, which I just completely loved, and it just really got me joined with the team and the organization. So just really happy to be a part of that. So and speaking of, I going back to that time is really the first time we attended a Small Giants conference, is when we made the commitment to commit to our culture. And it was something that Chris, our founder, and I had wanted to do for a long time, but we wanted to make sure that once we committed to it, we were going to stay true to it and do it in the right kind of way. And he and I both came out of more command and control, big four finance and accounting backgrounds, early in our career, both of us for about 10 years or so. And so we knew what that was like, but we really were committed to having an environment where you can learn and grow, work hard, serve your clients, and have a culture of meaning and where folks just enjoy coming to work and they enjoy the relationships that they have, and that where we can put our people first and have that healthy combination of both.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we knew that you asked me a really long question, so I can go on for this, but so I'll say a couple more things, I'll stop, and then maybe we can, just get into a conversation on it. But we knew that once we committed to it, that we needed to maintain it every single day. So we wanted to be very purposeful. The good thing about being accountants is that when we set our mind to a process, we follow that process, which helps us to really stay true to what we're doing and to reach that success and execute on it. Chris, our founder, is a very dedicated person, but he really enjoys having a good time as well. So we try to strike, and I think we do a good job of a balance between bringing our A game and working hard and taking what we do seriously, but not taking ourselves seriously. So oftentimes that means we have a little bit of comic relief every now and again to let off some steam and just to enjoy each other's company and time.
I think you hit on something a little bit earlier then, in that it takes a commitment to do this. It takes sort of vision of where we want to go and what it's going to look like and how we're going to shape it. But we actually got to commit to it, because business is up and down, right? It can be a bit of a roller coaster ride. And sometimes the first things to be thrown off are things like values, people's first, culture, those kind of things. But I was quite interested in how you described, as accountants, we actually are used to sort of looking at things from a kind of process. What's the process that we follow to make this work? Were there times where you thought, oh, this culture stuff doesn't really work, or did it work for you from the beginning?
No, it didn't work for us from the beginning, honestly. I mean, prior to coming to that conference, we had done some things in like figuring out our mission and our values. We had put some profit sharing in place. We knew we needed to create stickiness with our team members. I oftentimes say we're in the people business. We just happen to do accounting. And so our people are our asset. They're our biggest resource. With that comes their free will and their lives and things that go on, and that we need to make sure that we stay attuned to, and accustomed to. And so, just being very purposeful about that, we knew was what was going to drive success in that way. So we tried a couple of things before we really got specific about that process. And we said, okay, we're going to get really serious about it. And we did start with you guys at Small Giants. We also brought into it Zing Train and some of the things that they offer around the client side of it. And that's where we developed our mission, and we call them passions, but essentially they're our values that we stand for and live behind. So we went through a purposeful exercise on that as well. A lot of the different things that we employ, in addition to Zing Train, which is open book management, we learned about through Small Giants. And so it's a nice triumvirate of the three, to be honest, to really help you think about people first, also making sure you do right by your clients, and then opening the books, which we are open book management, in a way such that people really understand, our team members understand how they can make an impact. When they understand that, they feel value for themselves, then the part about serving the clients is a very natural progression, because you have such an amazing underlying foundation from which to draw upon. So we didn't start off immediately having it all perfect by any means. We set a few markers of foundation in place, and then we set out to really brand our space so that we can have those reminders every single day, until we were able to really ingrain and embed it in our organization in terms of what we do every single day, right? And so it just takes that repetition. Tell them what you're going to tell them. Tell them what you told them. The standard thing that goes along those lines. So we've got conference rooms that are named after our values. And that probably sounds really esoteric and not a big deal, but every little piece of that is important. The very final piece that we put into place a couple of years ago, because it doesn't just happen overnight, is making sure that we take that values alignment and that people's first approach and really incorporate it very purposefully into our hiring process as well as our performance feedback. And that was the kind of the final bow, if you will, or some of the icing on the cake. Doesn't mean we're done, but
Yeah,
we
it's.
feel really good about having it comprehensively woven throughout our entire organization. Still have to get up every day and work on it, though.
I mean, I'm just thinking for the audience and for people listening in. This when we looked at this with you and we visited Venturity last week, it took a period of time. I think if I'm not mistaken, this started back in, was it 2012 or so?
2012, 14, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're talking a decade.
Decade.
What's the vision for the decade? And I saw the steps that you took as you kind of took us through. This is what we did in 2012. This is what we did in 2013, 14, 17, and where you introduced different things. So it's not trying to do it all at once, and it's not
Yeah.
one and done. It's kind of layering these things on. You talk about the mix between Zingerman's for service and looking after customers, great game of business for making sure that the financials are right and the team's playing the game. Small Giants bringing in the softer side of the business, the culture, the values, and kind of bringing things together. But I also noticed you have a really powerful onboarding process using things like a smart. Well, to think of the author of the book is
The top grade process.
top grading.
Yes. Yeah.
So very intentional, and you've it's taken 10 years, but you've kind of built, and yeah,
We did. And some of those things we picked up here and there pieces. Now we have really purposefully tied them all together. So we had the top grading interview process for a really long time. What we wove into that is during that process, we're specifically looking for things that we have defined that fall within our 5 passions, right? And so
yeah,
when we look to check that box, we tie them back to not just the words. So one of our words is say great accounting, another one is engaging environment. We've taken one step further and we've defined what that means for Venturity so that when we're looking for a team member and assessing whether or not they're going to be a good fit, and by that, it doesn't just mean that they can do accounting, it means that they contribute to our culture, right? Everyone's responsible for 100% of the role they're going to play in keeping our environment engaging. Not that we're going to have clones, but that they do it in the way that makes sense for them. But underlying all of that is we're rooted in a value system that we all align on, right?
yeah,
And so when we go through that top grading process and we go back and ask somebody, what were you known for in your family? Where were you in your birth order? And how would your siblings remember you, or your most favorite senior teacher in high school, which is what some of the questions are, to be honest. We're looking for things that we can say, okay, that shows that they are going to have integrity, or that shows that they are going to lean in and engage in their environment in a way that is comfortable and makes sense for them, to where they will feel good about doing that here within our organization, and we can see that they will contribute to that and help us maintain that standard that we now all live by.
I mean, those are kind of those questions that help the team to be more cohesive, to open up, to be vulnerable, and
Correct.
to really play as a team. Otherwise, you're all kind of doing your own individual thing.
Very much. We're a team-based organization, so we serve
Yeah,
our clients collaboratively and from a team perspective, which is why it was so important to make sure we ally, on that common language, which we didn't always have. I mean, we put some of those things in place, and then we came back around and said, okay, we're really going to find them. What was super interesting, we took a year, and it kind of culminated around the time our founder transitioned out, and we went back to each one of those values, which we call passions, and we did an hour and a half long class on each one of those as an organization to say, hey, why did we pick that in the first place? What was it like? What were we thinking back in 2012 when we chose that? How has it manifested itself through examples since then? So that we can really make sure that we're understanding it, acknowledging it, and continuing to live it. One of the things that just over the years that John, I knew that we sort of maybe had kind of gotten close to arriving where it's sort of become second nature, is when we would be having a conversation internally about something. And, one of our other passions is client experience, and we have a purposeful program around that. But now it's not uncommon for somebody to say, well, from a client experience perspective, I think we need to do this.
Yeah.
We all know what that means. And so before we didn't have that common language, but
Yeah.
my client experience hat on. So again, it's that common language, and we know what those parameters are when we're thinking about what should that conversation look like with a client.
Yeah, and that's so important. Something else, Deanna, that stood out for me was this focus on the client and the client expectations. And we often go out and we onboard a new client, we take a new client, and we think we're doing everything right. But your team is very intentional, very conscious about getting feedback from a client, taking that in, and are we actually meeting the expectations of where we should be? And that really stood out for me. Something else I was curious about, just sort of stepping back a little bit. So many business owners, founders, CEOs, I think one of the biggest changes that needs to happen is this mindset shift. And I was talking to a CEO in London not long ago who said to me, 18 months ago, I was in the boardroom just about in tears. It had just got to that stage. Companies at 15 million in revenue, good business, but the weight of what was going on was just kind of overwhelming for him. And he said to me, I went to a Vistage meeting, I learned about EOS, and they put EOS in, and things are radically different right now. And I think the point is that I don't see EOS as what made the difference, but his mindset change. That you have to have this mindset kind of change. And it sounds like, in this case, for you folks attending the Small Giants conference, there was a sort of shift in mindset there that set you on a new path. Is that what happened, or was it?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't interrupt you. Absolutely. It came at a time where we had tried a fair amount of things that we know to be true, or we thought we knew to be true about engaging our team members and just moving forward, whether it was growth. Really, one of the things that we wanted to do was improve our profitability, our
Yeah,
gross margin specifically. We were working really hard. But, as a professional services company, capacity utilization, people engagement was really where we felt like we had some holes. And we just tried different things, incentivizing individual teams, but that didn't really work because you've got one team who's working really well. They get all their work done. They've got all their capacity utilized, and then they go home for the night. And then there's another team who's either has nothing to do or is way overwhelmed, and they're not going to reach that goal. And so they either give up or they've got a lot of negative capacity. And we're like, okay, well, that's not going to work. And so they don't really have the right incentives, And so when we went open book and started thinking about how can we work with our clients better, how can we work with each other better, now we have situations where people will be like, hey, I've got this extra time. Can I help you out? And those little things that we've put in have really what has helped us to come together, as a culture. And it's really improved our profitability and our financial performance, which has allowed us to do other things. And again, it's not perfect. It's always still a work in progress and in a journey. We don't always get it right. So yes, we do a lot with our clients around making sure we have proper expectations set and that we live up to them when we ask them for feedback. Again, we don't always hit every single mark, but it allows us to have a forum to come back around for a conversation when a conversation needs to be had.
Okay. So I want to talk a bit about employee ownership, because we mentioned that Chris has sort of moved on. But before we get into that, what's shaped you as a leader over the years? What are some of the things that have, for Deanna, helped shape how you think about leading teams and had a big influence on you?
Yeah, I think a lot of the things that really drew me to leadership is that transformational or that strategic side of it. I again came out of investment banking in the late '80s.
Ah, yes, I remember. Yeah.
So I've had a lot of that environment of, here. need to get this done. And if you're not up for that, then the next person's in line to do it. And I'm sorry if you had, something planned. And I learned so much from that environment, and I would definitely do it again. I loved the work. I loved the opportunity to work with companies and to solve problems and to just that caliber of work. But I really was seeking a way to be able to do that kind of work, but also do it in a way where folks really felt valued, and where communication and vulnerability and coming together as a team, where those two things could align. And so that's what's driven me a lot in terms of just the leadership style that I have. I I'd say that I'm somewhat approachable. So for me, I need to work on sometimes maybe not. And I think that's part of like maybe working, growing up in this side of the business, on the business development side, and then transitioning into the CEO role, and just having to adjust to that a little bit, and know that now there is a little bit of difference in me being in the role that I'm in, and I can't maybe always go to the things or be involved in the things in the way that I used to be. I can still be involved, but it's in, it's in a different way. Um, I'm very big on, though, just keeping and maintaining open lines of communication. And that's
Yeah, that's
super important to me.
uh, talking about being very approachable. There was something that I think I noticed with your teams. There's a technique that you folks use as you walk up to somebody. I think 4 steps. Am I right? Um, I suppose you've got accountants working in an open office. People are focused on what they're doing. What's that process that you use? I thought it was really good and was one of the big takeaways for me.
Yeah, so it's called an upfront contract, and I'm gonna credit Sandler for it. I don't know if we said that the other day, but I'm gonna credit Sandler because we went through some sales training with them back in 2015. And again, it's another system and it's another process that sets the stage for really any type of meeting. And we learned it in the context of a sales or business development meeting. To start every meeting when you're working with a prospect in the same kind of way, to where within the first couple of minutes you hit the agenda, you talk about the time that you're going to commit to this meeting, you talk about that you're going to hit anything that's possibly changed. If you have a elephant in the room topic, you can go ahead and get it out and say something like, "Hey, I've got an uncomfortable thing that we have, something that may or may not be, comfortable or uncomfortable to talk about. We're going to hit that. Is that okay with you? Is this a good time to do that?" And it's just about establishing equal business stature,
Mm.
right, and just mutual respect for the time. So that's where it was rooted in, and we've had really great success with that. But then we introduced it to our greater organization. And now, even if you've got just the smallest of a conversation, which seems to be the smallest of a conversation with somebody, whether you're calling them on the phone on an ad hoc basis or you are walking up to your desk, what we have really committed to being second nature for us is we walk up and we say, "Hey, do you have a few minutes? I got a couple of things I want to cover with you. I need to probably get this answered by this time. Does that work for you, or do we need to set a time?" So within like 10 or 15 seconds, we know if it's a good time. And it's okay for somebody to say, "Hey, I want to help you out, but I need to get this out. Can we pick that back up in an hour and 15 minutes?" And it's just an efficient way to,
Yeah.
to communicate, but also a very respectful way. Um, and I'm a talker, so I'm one of those folks with our people here in the room. I'm the one who is going to get out of my chair and go walk and talk to somebody versus sending an email. And sometimes when I walk up now, I might scare somebody, so I try to be very, again, like respectful of that process, because they're heads down and they're super focused, right? And so we don't want to interrupt that thought process or what they're thinking. But now the folks know, okay, when that happens, stop for a second. If it's a good time, great. If it's not, then we can set another time.
And it just goes back to culture and the respect amongst everybody in the organization,
Yeah.
and being respectful
Yes.
of each other's time. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. It
Okay.
doesn't always
So
happen, but we try our best.
employee ownership. One of the things we were talking about before we got into the call, you folks are an ESOP, employee stock ownership program. And I guess one of the questions that's going through my mind is, are we seeing a trend toward more employee ownership? I kind of feel like that's what's going on, but I have conversations with folks who are, why would somebody want to sell the business to the employees when they could go off and sell for a fortune to private equity or a strategic buyer? But it feels like there is this trend toward, or growing trend toward, employee ownership. And I'm curious, Dan, about your thoughts on that, and particularly coming from this environment, whether you sort of feeling it as well, or if I'm alone out there on this.
Yeah, well, so it's hard to know, John, because I feel like the environment and the community that we surround ourselves with, being Small Giants and Open Book Management, we're also involved in another organization called Tugboat, which is
Yeah.
primarily multi generational companies, as well as ESOP owned companies. So it's hard to know if we're seeing more or if it's just sort of the company you keep. But I do feel like that there is a little bit of a return to taking a step back and at least throwing the employee ownership option into the mix more than it has been in the last handful of years, especially in our professional service, or more specifically the accounting world, as private equity is coming into our world and just causing the old partnership model, if you will, to be questioned and possibly changed. So I know a lot of the firms that have a partnership model where private equity is coming into the space, they're taking a step back to say, could we consider employee ownership as an
Mm.
alternative, or maybe it's something slightly different from a partnership model, as a way to transfer wealth, but not necessarily the full blown private equity where you're turning over, complete control, if you will, or setting up a completely different environment and set of expectations. So it feels like that to me. It seems like there's more out there in the world in terms of information about them. More people want to get educated. There's different ways besides ESOP to have employee ownership. So I think that's one of the things we chose. Our founder chose the ESOP route, but there's different types of trust or different structuring mechanisms now that are out there that can be evaluated as well to see what's right for your organization.
Yeah, no, you folks have, I mean, you basically have taken kind of the first step, 20% ESOP. Oh, is that typical? Is it typical to sort of take that first step, a small percentage, kind of figure that out? And I imagine that part of that is because you got to fund the ESOP, but is that sort of the typical approach stepping in?
Yeah, I don't know if it's typical or not. I don't think we are unusual. Yeah, Chris did analyze that for our company, and really where he got to on that, because I know companies that are 20, 30, 50%, and then I know some that completely went all in at 100%. I think the thing that made the 20, not to speak for Chris, but I will, that made it the right thing for us was that he knew he wanted to go employee ownership after evaluating a whole host of options. You heard, him speak about
Yeah.
that last week. Once he made that decision, he wanted to go ahead and get the ownership, some aspect of it, into the hands of our team members. What also needed to go on that list was not causing undue burden on our company, to make sure that we weren't taking on too much in the way of that ownership all at once, because we were really looking to utilize, to really grow our company at the time we put it in place. And we had experienced some decent growth, but not the kind of growth that we felt like we needed to have in order to make the employee stock ownership program, a viable program for everyone involved. So we were kind of, doing a couple of different things there at one time, and it really worked for us, to go ahead and get some of that ownership out there and start that process. But again, not overburden the company. And so far so good. It's
So good. Yeah.
working, and we're educating. I'll go back to the question you asked me before, because I did think of something on just the concept of, are we seeing more and more employee ownership out there? And I think one aspect that maybe could be contributing to that is just the challenge of finding good labor and good people to work, and trying to sort of say, okay, what can we bring to somebody to encourage them to come to our organization, but also stay within our organization. And so I think just that whole idea of investing in culture and providing them, folks with the opportunity to find a place that really works for them. I think employee ownership allows you to set yourself apart in that way. So I think more and more folks are considering that, because it gives people that, in a world of instant gratification, for those that are looking for more, it can give you the opportunity to really put some roots down and know that what you're putting in is going to have some return on it for you in a whole host of ways, including building wealth for you personally.
Yeah, I hear that. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, basically,
as you say, it's difficult to find great people to hold on to those people. But when I watch your team, and I think this probably ties into playing great game of business as well. You, it's not you or Chris just standing up front there. The whole team is there playing the game. Where are we with our numbers at the moment? Everybody's calling out their numbers, giving the explanation of why the numbers are where they're at. They truly feel like they own part of that business.
They do. Yeah, they
Yeah,
do.
they really do, which changes things dramatically. I mean, you started with great game of business long before you thought about employee ownership, or wasn't sort of let's get this in and then go there? Did being part of the GGOB community influence?
I think it definitely had some influence. I mean, I think we learned about you guys first for sure, and then through attending summits and visiting different companies that really subscribe to the small giants methodology, and spending time with Bo and Paul and the
Yeah,
original group. You're kind of in that before you're even in your current role. We just really got educated more and more on how to bring all those types of things together. So when we found and committed to the open book management, I don't know that Chris has officially gone on record that said this step and then this step, but we committed to the open book management first, and in that, with the bonus program we have there, it's an opportunity to get bonus in a current compensation way, to where you can see an immediate impact. So the next, and for us, that's at the gross margin line. But so the next evolution that seemed to make sense was then to be like, okay, we can take that and we can add on to that, in addition to knowing how to make an impact, thinking and acting, and really understanding how to run your business, like an owner. It was also an exit strategy option for him too, right?
yeah,
So it's kind of has a twofold, purpose to it. But I do believe by adopting open book management first, it's allowed us to even have a greater degree of success with the ESOP. I know there are companies out there that are employee owned that don't share, or don't let me say, they might share because they have to because they're owners, but they don't get their team members involved in the running of the business and making decisions such that they can see the impact. They're making that, but they're not the tying of all of that together. I don't see it as cohesively if you're not open book. That doesn't mean that ESOP can't be successful, but we just figured and found so far that by bringing all of that together and really purposefully tying it together gives us the best chance for success.
yeah. I imagine it kind of gets you used to that kind of way of thinking, because ultimately you're going to be owned by a number of employees,
Right.
and you're going to be sharing more, and it moves you
Right.
from that mindset.
So,
I mean,
an
yeah,
example, I'll just do a quick example, is on the business development side. When before we were open book, we had folks that found the work, folks that onboarded the work, folks that do the work on an ongoing basis. And this is when I was more on the front lines of selling business. Well, I would go out and I'd sell a new opportunity. I'd bring it in, super excited, closed a deal. We're going to help out this client. It's going to be great. We're going to grow. And then Chris and I would be like, oh, okay, who's going to go tell that controller team that they got a new client? Because for them, it just meant potentially more work, right? They didn't
yeah,
understand it. And not only did they not understand it, they didn't really fully understand the cost of acquisition, right? Of going after a new client. What I may not have understood, or our BD team might not have understood, is what happens every single day to execute on what the front end of the house sells and talks about, right? And so now our teams have a much greater window into business development. They are not expected to sell by any means,
uh,
but you better believe they understand what it means to put the time and energy in to find a client. Our BD team knows that they need to find the right kind of client and set the scope up in the right kind of way so that our operations team can execute. And one might say, oh, that's intuitive, but we remind each other of that every week when we get together and huddle. The other thing that is really great about it is, if say we might be not closing the number of deals we need to in any given month, having that support of the rest of the team, even though it's not their responsibility, is amazing. It far outweighs having to stand up in front of everybody and say, hey, I haven't closed anything this month. That can be scary too for
yeah,
a person, because before, they sort of knew and they sort of didn't, right? Not until, Some people knew, but not everybody. But it was actually freeing and empowering to be able to say, okay, let's all work on this potential problem together, or let's all get excited together when we do hit it. It works even better when you're facing something that doesn't necessarily, work or isn't going in your favor, to be able to rally around the information to make changes. That's when it's really important to have the open book and the culture, and the trusting teams and the things that is the people first type of, focus.
And just this clarity, everybody understands
Right.
what's going on.
Yeah.
You're talking about what's happening in the business development process, but equally like the importance of retaining a client, and the going back to what you were saying about we're talking about meeting expectations and making sure that we aren't losing the hard sort of work that business development put in to win the client. The business development folks understand what it means to take on a new client for the workload, and everybody's just clear about what's going on, and that's powerful.
Yeah, it is powerful. Even on the back end, we haven't kept every client. We have a goal of
Yeah.
keeping every client. That's a fantastic goal. But sometimes clients will move on for a variety of different reasons. We've also taken sort of that knowledge, from like just taking our passion of client experience, all the way through our entire organization, so that when a client decides, either we decide or they decide it's time to move on, we don't have very many surprises in that area anymore, because we're having that open dialogue of communication. And so we're able to transition out or offboard a client in a very purposeful and meaningful way, and set them up for success. And that's also super important to us as well, because you never know, something might change. They might be back, or you want them to leave with just the same type of feeling that they had when they made the decision to walk in the door with us.
So just being a little bit curious, how about the size of the organization back in 2012? Where were you folks at in terms of sort of team size back then?
Yeah. Okay. You're going to be, I've been here 22 years. So I think that we were around maybe 15 folks, something, 15, 20.
15 folks, right? And
To a point where we were like, all right, we got to get a little bit more like purposeful. We just can't sit around a table and decide what we're going to do anymore, or talk about what we know to be true on how we're going to work with our clients. We've got to get it out of our head. So it was probably around 15, don't quote me, but probably 15, no more than 20 people for sure.
The core team now was it 40 or 60? I can't.
We're right just under 50 is
just under 50 core team.
And then we have an offshore team that's got another 80 folks.
So what I'm trying to illustrate here, without going into revenue and that sort of thing, is there were a number of businesses at this passport event that we had who were around that kind of mark and saying, well, it's great to see Venturity and how they've done it, and it's great to see how Textamall has done it, and how these are bigger organizations. But really, it's the past 10 years. If when you can look back now and you say, well, these are the dots that all connect to where you are right now. Modeling yourself on businesses like yours, but what are the things that we need to do? What are the layers that we kind of need to add over time to get from where we are right now to where we want to be? And it takes that 10-year kind of thinking to be able to do that. That's our vision, and now let's go and execute it year on year, quarter on quarter.
Yeah, it's just the reinforcement of it, and I say just because it's a lot of work, and holding each other, including me and the leadership, accountable to it. From the very beginning, it's been more of a bottom-up, team-based approach than it has been top-down. Of course, the leadership set the stage of this is what we'd like to incorporate into our company and made a commitment to it. Like I told you, Chris and I did not come out of this environment, so we committed to it. And there are days when we're like, wait, we committed to this, because you've got to get up, out of bed every day and thinking about it in a slightly different way. The world has definitely changed and come around to more of this type of kind of mindset and culture. It's in the process of doing so. But, you're right, John. It's definitely, an evolution and something that you have to commit to. I think the one thing that is super interesting about it is when we did have the leadership transition at the CEO level, I've gotten the question, what was that like to do the continuity of culture? And yes, we were very, again, we're purposeful about it, but the entire team is responsible for the culture. We all have to model the way and set it in our own, in our own way, and hold each other accountable to it. And I do think obviously there's something to be said for the fact that Chris and I grew up in the business together. And so I, believe that I'm the natural person to take us through that transition from
Yep.
founder led to CEO and management team led, which that is a transition in and of itself, regardless of what kind of culture you have. Right. I mean, that's that one of my big commitments is to make sure we can get us successfully through that, which sets the team up, for growth. But some of the day-to-day things that we know to be true about our organization, we are now each and every one of us is living that in our own way and really holding ourselves and each other and our teams accountable to doing so. Not perfectly by any means, but when we don't hit the marks and we come back around, we own it, and we understand why, and we talk about it. Work in progress, though, for sure.
Yeah, and I think that is the thing. It is a work in progress.
Total work in progress, and it continues for us. It really does, because it's one thing to have it as a 10 or 20 person organization, another to have it as a 50, and another to have it as a 75 or 100. Now that we're bringing our offshore team more and more into the fold with the joint venture that we made official. We've had this team for 18 years. We've operated like a real partnership. We formalized the joint venture this last year so that we can bring additional opportunities to the table for each of us. And so now for us, it's like making sure that we continue to bring that team into the fold of our culture. And very much for a long time now, we've been a we-based organization, but there's more that we can do there with that.
Yeah. You folks recently won an award, a Great Game of Business Award. Tell us about that. What was that award for? In terms
So it's called the Healthy Company Award. We actually, back in 2017, the first year that we adopted Great Game, and plug for a coach and following the rules that they lay out for that system, and putting a design team in place that did not have management team members on it. So we won the Rookie of the Year award back in 2017 for having some great success. And we're just very committed to the open book management. So we put our hat in the ring again this year. They've changed the awards up a little bit. Now they're called a Healthy Company Award, which measures a lot of different areas, not just your financial performance, but also, again, the happiness, the satisfaction of your team members and things like that. And so you've got a survey process to go through. You have a benchmarking process financially, and then you submit some stories about how you are living that, open book management or people first, kind of focus. And so we were able to do that, and we were just fortunate that we won this year. It's a lot of great.
Congratulations! Yeah,
doing that.
Awesome.
So
exciting. So one last question. Who was your coach?
Our coach is Wayne Weitzel. So
okay.
he's phenomenal, and we've actually kept a version of our design team in place since we started playing the game. Again, I told you we're accountants, we're very process oriented, so we follow the rules.
Yeah, it makes a difference. They always said you follow the rules and you'll get there. Sometimes you just got to do that, right?
I know when it has to get reined in, because I want to do about 10 things at one time. So, yeah.
Okay, so one last question.
Sure.
The show's called The Freedom Experience. Deanna, what does freedom mean to you as a CEO, as an entrepreneur? What's important to you there?
Just the ability to feel empowered, to really bring your A game to the table and to make a mark, in the organization. When I joined Venturity back in 2003, I was coming off of a period of time of being at home for 5 years. I had young kids, and I had worked a pretty demanding career for 10 years prior to that 5 of taking off. And I was looking for something that was going to allow me to check several boxes. Yeah. And I'm not going to call it work-life balance, because we could have a whole podcast on what that means. But I had a definition in my mind of what that meant to me and what was going to make it the right thing for me. And when I learned about the business model, which was through a friend and a referral partner, so the power of connections and talking to people and making introductions, cannot underscore that enough. I fell in love with the business model. I was like, this is the coolest thing. We're helping companies. This company is helping companies solve problems through accounting, and really helping business owners and investment-backed companies really understand what they can do with the information that they have. So I fell in love with that. I met Chris, but I had 3 young kids at home. And I was super, super passionate about what we were doing and the ability to be a part of this growing team. There was, 5 people in our organization at the time. And, through the conversations with Chris and talking about business development, he afforded me the opportunity to really be empowered to craft what my role was gonna look like. And I had no idea.
Yeah.
I just knew that I was passionate about it. And so from day one, for whatever reason, I think it was probably because of my passion for the model and serving clients, I really felt and operated in some ways as if it was my own company, even though it was not in the beginning. I've since have ownership, but he gave me that freedom, and it was really through empowerment and trust that allowed me to really sort of make it my own, but also to do right by Venturity.
Love it. Yeah. And it just, you don't have to be an owner to start with. Coming in and finding a company that matches your values, finding that place that you really feel, I have the freedom to do what I want to do here, makes a massive difference.
Yeah, it's just so important. And so that's another big thing for me when you ask me about just sort of my leadership style. I want folks to be empowered. I want them to want to be here. When somebody leaves, to go do something else, for me, my job is to make sure that I give them every reason in the book, from setting up expectations to empowerment to providing opportunities, every reason to not think about leaving. I feel like that's what my role as a CEO is, for just bringing people along and creating the right type of environment.
Love it. Thank you so much for taking the time out
Thank you, and congrats on your new role. Super excited.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for tuning into the Freedom Experience. If this episode sparked something for you, hit the subscribe button, leave us a review, and share it with somebody who cares about building a great company. It helps us to reach more leaders who are ready to grow with purpose. To learn more about how we're growing next generation leaders and value-based businesses, head on over to smallgiants.org. That's smallgiants.org. You'll find practical tools, leadership workshops, and a community of business owners who put people first. Now, if you want to learn more about Deanna, to Venturity, and to her LinkedIn down below, and if you want to see what Venturity is doing, then head over, check them out. They're a powerful example for what values-driven leadership can look like inside any company. That's it from me. See you next time.